Good evening, everyone. My name is Paul Fahrenheit, and for the inaugural series on my channel, I would like to cover just a grab bag of Oswald Spengler's thought. I know individuals like John David Ebert and Morgoth have covered Oswald Spengler to an extent that I don't think is possible for me, and those two are really great heroes of mine. I would highly recommend everyone to go check out their channels and their videos on Oswald Spengler, but also their other videos because they are both phenomenal content creators. But I would like to particularly look into Oswald Spengler's essay, Prussianism and Socialism, where he sort of outlines the different cultural stages of the West's development and different peoples who have manifested different ideas over time. And particularly, the section I would like to look at is Spain, what Oswald Spengler thinks about Spain and the Spaniards. Now, this is personally interesting to me because Spain and Latin America, and to a lesser extent, the Holy Roman Empire, are my specializations. And I think Spain has a very important place within the history of the West, within a Western culture, Western politics, that a lot of this sphere doesn't really focus on so much, doesn't really understand so much how they relate to our modern day ideas and our modern day conceptions. Now, I'm not going to read Spengler's whole 4 or 5 paragraphs on Spain because that would make this a 30-minute video, but I am going to hit on the major points and then I'm going to give you some of my own ideas about it at the end and how I think it relates to what's going on now. So, first and foremost, Spengler styles Spain as the fulfillment of the earlier Gothic idea of the West. This is the primacy of the emperor and the primacy of the pope, or as I call them, the way of the sword and the way of the word. This is the highest level of achievement during the medieval European, medieval Western culture soul. And Spain, with Ultramontanism, with the Catholic monarchy, is the fulfillment of this universal monarchy. The Habsburgs, to quote Spengler exactly, the empire founded by the Spanish Habsburgs was the realization of the Hohenstaufen ideal, just as the Council of Trent realized the ideal of the papacy. So Spengler's saying that Spain and Spain's relationship to the Habsburgs and the Catholic Church realizes the dream of both the papacy and the Holy Roman Emperor since the Middle Ages, since the Hohenstaufens, of a universal monarchy and a universal church. Pre-Reformation, this was as high as it got. Um, but then later in the essay, Spengler starts talking about Spanish politics. He talks about how the modern state, as we know it, was created in El Escorial. And he's completely right. Charles V, the first monarch to style himself King of Spain and not King of Castile and Aragon, laid the foundations for the Spanish Empire, the Spanish state in El Escorial, because under his reign was when the great conquests of the Aztecs and the Inca occurred. And it's only really with his abdication to Philip II that the state really, the foundations get built up and fulfilled. Philip II is the creator, I think, in my humble opinion, of the modern state. El Escorial is described as having mountains of paperwork, an empire of paper, and Philip II as, quote, the world's largest brain, unquote. And Philip II personally was fulfilling policy objectives everywhere from the Netherlands to Latin America to the Philippines. And Spengler talks about this. He says that all the techniques of modern statesmanship had their origin in Madrid. National and dynastic politics on the grand scale, cabinet diplomacy, the use of war as a deliberated and calculated move in the intricate chess game of grand strategy. So the idea of international foreign policy has its origin in Spain. And Spengler later talks about how Spain also created this idea of universalism as opposed to the previous ideas of the Italian Renaissance, which was a rebellion against the Faustian soul of infinite spaces, infinite will to power, infinite everything, breaking down all borders, covering everything, perpetual motion, and all that. The Spaniards were the first ones to truly sort of realize that ideal to a certain extent, and they saw their object as world domination. And ever since the Spaniards, that object has never gone away, according to Spengler. And this has it's manifestation in both the state and the church, because as we know, Spain is the fulfillment of the church state ideal of the West. Ultramontanism is the primacy of the papacy in all affairs, how the Pope is the sort of the ruler of the world in God's stead. And his defenders in the temporal realm are the most Catholic monarchs, the Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire and the kings of Spain. Um, and Spengler talks about how during the Reformation and the Renaissance churches, how the true Catholics sort of revolted in Spain and in Vienna against the Renaissance and Reformation churches, which were very politicized. The churches were turned to very much localized politics. You had these Italian banking families, the Medicis, the Borgias, although admittedly the Borgias were Catalonian, but you have all these other, Italian banking families all buying cardinalships and all buying the papacy, and the Reformation churches as well. The German churches, Calvin and Luther, the princes took those and turned those to their own personal benefit of their realms. And the North German princes, like the Duke of Saxony and later the Margrave of Brandenburg under the Hohenzollerns and all of that, would take the Reformation churches and use them as political justifications for their small term petty gains. And a revolt against that in the support of the universal church occurred in both Madrid and Vienna. Um, and this is where Ultramontanism reaches its peak. Uh, and Spengler says, I think this is a very powerful sentence. He says, Bismarck is the last of the Spanish style statesmen. And this means that Bismarck was the last one to sort of look at the world and see any sort of means necessary to achieve policy goals. This is what was created in El Escorial. This is what Philip II used: alliances, diplomatic pressure, military pressure, warfare. It's all a grand chess game to be played between the grand strategists at court. And when Spengler talks about Austria and Austria-Hungary, how there's still the sort of, even in 1914, Austria-Hungary was the last vestiges of this Spanish sensibility. He goes so far to call the Austrians Spanish in soul. And another great sentence he has is, a language is not enough to make a people. And I genuinely do believe that, because a people generally tends to be more than just biology, more than just language. Culture, I think, is at the center of a race of people, and the other two, biology and culture, or not culture, and biology and language, follow along from culture. But I think the biggest irony of it is that the Spanish style statesman, the last of them in Bismarck, was the one who defeated the Spanish style people in Austria Hungary at the Battle of Königgrätz. Although in the essay, Spengler calls this French Spain, or not French Spain, French Germany. As opposed to Spanish Germany, which was defeated in 1648. He says French Germany was obsessed with its own little domains and the own expansion of their personal fiefs. And he's talking about the German Confederation in the post Treaty of Vienna, post 1815 world. And I happen to fully agree. And Spengler concludes the section on Spain by speaking of the apotheosis of Spain being Wallenstein's proposal to march on Constantinople, which never fell through. And the fall of Wallenstein is in many ways the fall of the Spanish spirit. Um, and I think this is a very good analysis of the role Spain has played in the cultural history of the West, and and their role within Western European politics. One final thing I want to point out about this is that when Spengler talks about how in 1914, when Austria declared war against Serbia, this was in the Spanish mold. This is very correct. If you look at Austria's track record in World War One, Austria just makes so many mistakes in the political sphere, and this is because they're a good 2, 3 centuries behind the rest of the competition. England, in particular, learn the wonders and the magic of ideological and diplomatic denial and strategy of making someone else declare war for you so you have better justifications and all of that. But that's outside the scope of this video. So a few final thoughts I wanted to get in before I finish up the video was, I think that Spain fulfills a very interesting position in the West's history. I see it as kind of the great midpoint. It is the fulfillment of the Middle Ages ideal of the earliest cultural incarnation of the West in the terms of emperor and papacy, but in it you also see the seeds of the modern age. Everyone says if you want to see what has happened in modernity, look at Paris in 1789. I say if you want to see everything that happens in modernity, look at Madrid in 1630 or before, especially before in the 1500s. That is Madrid at its height as the creation and almost the cradle of modernity. And honestly, I think that our modern perceptions of a universalized state, of a universalized hegemony of I wouldn't say a church. I guess church has become the doctor state or the corporation. All of that takes its inspiration from Spain. And Spain is really the highest that anything in the West ever got in terms of power, in terms of influence, in terms of authority, when it comes to universal authority and universal rule. And honestly, I think by giving a closer study of Spain, not only will we better understand the nature of the cathedral, the nature of global homo, but also the nature of the governments and military structures that they use against us. And quite frankly, I think almost all of them, if not all of them, are Spanish in nature when you clear away all the ideological justifications and the difference of tactics that are brought about by Great Britain and by other actors. So that's it for this video. It's my first video I made on this channel, and I hope you guys think I did a good job. If you want more content like this, please like and subscribe. Follow me on Twitter at CavKingPaul. Follow me on Instagram at CavKingPaul. I'm going to be posting more regularly if this video starts picking up. And go check out John David Ebert and Morgoth channels if you want to see a better analysis of the other people, such as the Germans and the English. Morgoth has a very good video on the Germans and the English. But other than that, I've been Paul Fahrenheit, and I hope you all have a very good night.